Hello, welcome to Bad Builds, where sometimes things just don't pan out the way you want them to. Today we're talking about the teacher. Now, what is the teacher? Well, let's get straight to the point. The teacher is essentially, you're a professor. You got tenure. You're working at a school or a college or something like that. And you just sit there in your fancy little tower and you go, nice pipe, but I gotta get out there. There's a few ways you can play the teacher. First is the master. The master has an apprentice, a little snot that follows him around and goes, I want to shoot a spell, or I want to shoot a bow, or can I pickpocket that guy? The best part behind this is that if your GM loves playing GM PCs, give them this. They instantaneously have a character they can play. Though make sure that your GM is not the kind to take control too much, because your follower/cohort should stay in the background at all times. And here's why. GMPCs work best when they're sort of backdrop elements, when they're there to provide utility or some knowledge or to help out in times of need, like, we need some more strength, come help us out. But if you play them as a forefront character, then they quickly start to overshadow players, and I'm someone who made that mistake a bunch, so trust me, it's a better idea not to do that too much. So have him sit in the background, have him show up every once in a while so everyone's like, that kid. But always give him a positive. Give him a positive and a negative. That way the players are like, I'm glad he doesn't act more, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad he's still there. Because if they want him too much, you'll lose control of it, and if they don't like him enough, well, as I mentioned here, they'll probably throw him in a ditch. They're like, yep, get the fuck out of here, you little snot kapoosh, he's in the dirt now. I need to stop swearing as much in these shows, but hey, that's something to improve upon. The Master is a great one to play if you want to if you just want to sit down every once in a while and be like, okay, I gotta go over my students' spell books, and you show them your spell book, and you start comparing notes, or you do a little practice run with them to keep yourself sharp. You can do a lot with this if you know what you're doing. Like the Master Thief having a little apprentice, or the Druid having I don't know, maybe he wild-shaped and he isn't coming back anymore, and you're like, I'm trying to find a cure for this, but until then, hey, free experience! Play it up a bit. Think about what you can do with it. Like, every class has a different way to handle this. Like, if you're a knight, you're training someone martially. Like, you have to do practice rounds every once in a while. Like, fighting an orc isn't the same as fighting someone with a lot more experience than an orc. And as I mentioned also on the top, if you're going to do a teacher, try to play higher level stuff. It's very difficult to justify the teacher when the circumstance are you're level 1. As I also mentioned, if your world level 1 is already a feat, I think in 5e, it's like, if you're level 1, you've already gotten something. Fine. But do think about how your apprentice is going to be developed and how they're going to look. Maybe they can only cast cantrips. Maybe they have only +2 to attack instead of the whole ram bam shabam. To kind of compensate for how they function. If they're a thief, they might be inclined to start stealing from the party and run away, being like, haha, my master thief test is to steal from my master. And you have this sort of nervous tension of like, do we want to keep him around? But at the same time, he's like, the two of them together can get anywhere and do anything. Like, they're a master thieving team. Let's see if we can think of it. A bard. Well, a bard, now you have another bard. One can cast the spell, the other keeps the music going. And, always give them something positive to do. Make sure they don't do everything. A good way to look at this is like this. If they do something useful every round, they're too active. If they do something useful every couple of rounds, that's okay. Try to slow it down a bit, because if they're active every round and they achieve something every round, and you've got a full party of 4 who are doing just fine, they're going to feel overshadowed, like, I don't want to be here. There's a reason why players are okay with, like, a guard that shows up, and then it's like, okay, for this one fight, we've got a guard who's going to steal some of our thunder, and they're less okay with, this guard keeps showing up and saving our asses. I prefer he not be there. He's a risk. I can't shoot fireball because he keeps getting in the way, and I told my fighter to take a bow and arrow, and this guy just, don't forget to give your apprentice a little bit of weaponry. This is maybe just a crossbow so you can shoot from the distance, and he will probably miss 90% of the time, but at the very least he's doing something, and he feels important, and you're like, hey, you did good, and you give him a pat in the back, and everyone feels good about themselves. There's a few ways to play your apprentice, of course. You can play your apprentice as begrudging. Now, the begrudging apprentice is kind of hard to play. Essentially, he gives power and status, because it's like, you are in service of a great master. And then the people who do that are generally people who can afford a great master. Or maybe you're an apprentice of a great master, and that's how they got to you. But the point is that he's begrudging, but he has some sort of advantage. Like, maybe he's just good with magic. Maybe he can help out. Maybe he gives you extra spells per day by being around. God damn it. There we go. Maybe he gives you extras for being around. Maybe he just gives you fame and status, like when you walk into town. So like, oh, that's that kid. Everyone bow down. And you get access to different places. And maybe he just brings money. Maybe he just has a bunch of money, and he's like, here, take some money. Buy an extra sword, the masterwork or something like that. Maybe he's overly curious and excited. He gets into trouble a lot because he keeps running around the place. You can calm him down when you need to. Like, you can stop him in case you're trying to do some sneaking. Like, he's not going to do that, because don't ever do that. As a PC, as a secondary PC, played by the GM especially, don't mess with your players' plans like that. Have them have just enough control, because if they don't, they're probably dead by the time you get to the entrance of the dungeon, and then the whole thing is like, eh. Maybe they're studious. Maybe they sit at the lip. Maybe they sip from the lips of their master at all moments, being like, tell me more about this beautiful knowledge. Such sexy knowledge. Gonna write in my book. They can provide you secondary knowledge checks. They can provide you with tips or assistance. Like, if you want to give an advice as like a GM, being like, players like, I want to hint with this puzzle, or hint with this map, or what do we do next? And the apprentice is like, well, I've been paying attention a lot, and I noticed that these walls are looking a bit funny. Which actually is also the curious. Now, the curious is, how do I say this? The curious is very dependent on the kind of GM you have. My God, you're gonna have a great time or a bad time depending on the kind of GM you have. So what you need as this kind of player is you need a GM that's willing to describe things for you more. So you walk into a room. The fighter and the thief immediately notice that there's something strange going on in the room. They see runes on the wall, and then the curious gets told, well, you recognize these runes because you've been spending hours studying the damn things while you were still in your little tower. And suddenly this character is like, I feel good about myself, because suddenly they get a lot more, like, initial value out of situations. Like, maybe the thief notices the trap, but you do it too. Like, the thief notices a trap, but so does the curious one, because he keeps looking at the damn floors all the time. And at one point he's like, hey, and on the other hand, like, the thief is like, thank goodness he also notices things. Now I'm not entirely dependent on my own skill. You know, he can compensate for other players like that. Maybe they know a lot about swordsmanship, so when you pick up a sword, he's like, well, I know this is a masterwork sword. It's also made from this and this guy. And the fighter's like, oh man, I'd love a sword that's really fancy, that makes me look cool. And it's like, yes, this one makes you look especially cool. This one not. This one makes you look like an asshole. Just throw it in the corner over there. The Curious is just a fantastic way to, again, provide clues to puzzles, or just give you something to work with. Like, maybe they're constantly trying a new combat stance. Every fight, they try a new spell or a new maneuver, and they keep doing new things, just seeing how it works and how it works against different enemies. They want to learn about their enemies. They want to learn how they work. Maybe they need to publish this information, like, in order to make their yearly knowledge quotas. Or maybe they do it because they just like knowledge. They're just like, oh man, I learned a thing. Ba-da-ba-ba, I learned a thing, and they do a little dance. Try not to give them experience bonus or anything like that, but do give them, like, inspiration or hero points or something whenever they play their character properly. Because being curious can get exhausting very fast, especially if you're doing escapism and you're not that kind of person. You're just like, I think it's fun, but I don't want to do it all the time. Don't punish them for it. Just give them something, play towards them. Like, the curious, again, reliant on the GM. Which means that if the GM can come your way a lot, like, the GM can be like, well, you instantly know this, or you know that, or your character identifies this and that. And also, let you compensate if you don't have a thief. Now, say that you're dealing with the teacher who is a failure. Oh man, this is exciting, isn't it? So, the Dishonored Squire is one thing, the failed teacher is another. You fucked up somehow. And you fucked up enough that you decided to leave, or you were forced to leave. Are you exiled from your facility? That's another thing to think about, like the severity. I should probably put that in, like, what's the punishment? That's a good one. So, there's a few ways to look at this, and I should have done this with the Dishonored one, but here, let's put it down here. First, there's a timing. How long ago have you fucked up? If it's recent, then people might remember it. If it's long ago and it was legendary, like, everyone is still talking about it, like, this affects your character. If it was recent, your character might be overreacting still. They might be trying to be like, oh, no, I swear, and they try to play it off as much as they can. If it was a long time ago, then maybe they're just grumpy that people are still bringing it up. It's like, that's not me. That was years ago. I'm not the same person I was back then. Which again gives you a nice angle and avenue for role-playing. Is now your character has this thing haunting them forever and ever, and they want to get rid of it somehow. Maybe they can't. Maybe it's something that will continue to haunt them until their deathbed. They have to learn to live with it. And now, maybe they're in the accepting phase. Maybe they're still in the grumpy phase. Who knows? Like, that information is important and helps settle your character. Severity. What actually happened? So it's important also to immediately establish what actually happened that your character is in this situation to begin with. It could be anything, really. As long as your GM agrees, of course. Always get your GM's permission. Did you blow up a classroom? Did you kill an apprentice by accident? Did you kill him with intention because he was turning into Voldemort? What was your reason for fucking up? Like, was it intentional or not? It's also an important question to ask and answer. Like, how intentional was it? Could it have been prevented? Do people know it could have been prevented, or do they think that you would have made that mistake regardless? These are all important questions, and you're going to have to answer them if you want to be a failed teacher, because, you know... so that actually goes to responsibility. So responsibility is... Are you actually even responsible for what people have accused you of? Was it your apprentice that did it? Was it someone else's apprentice, but he manages to push it all on you because the apprentice has enough respect and support in order so that he can get away with it? Like, these are important things to answer for yourself because they help establish, like, maybe your character now carries a grudge. They want to blow up the school. They're just done. They're like, you know what? Fuck the school. Fuck all of you. You ruined my life just to protect this little snot-nosed kid. I'm gonna do something real bad to get even with you. Maybe they are responsible. Maybe they don't take responsibility. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's why they got sent away. It's like, listen, you got to take responsibility for your actions, you know? At some point, you're personally responsible for your actions. And if it's, like, something severe, then people would be extra, like, judgmental about it. It's like, listen, you need to take responsibility for the fact that someone died on your watch. And the fact that you didn't is a terrible, terrible thing. But it can also be something else, like maybe they just blew up an entire laboratories facility. Like, it's not super bad. People are still, like, upset about it. But, you know, it's repairable damage. And for the most part, everyone is just, like, expecting you to start fixing it. Maybe that's why you're out and about, is you're trying to make up for things, or you're trying to get the money, pay off the dues, and then just move on with your life. You're like, if I pay off my dues, people will forgive me, and at the very least I can get on with my life and do something else. Maybe you were a wizard, and you're not a wizard anymore. Like, when the quest starts, you're now a fighter because you don't like how wizards respond and act to things, and you're like, I'm just going to be a fighter now. I'm just going to pick up a sword and start fighting. And you were level 1 back when that happened. Which would be kind of weird, because again, you're supposed to be high enough level to logically be a teacher. But again, if you can play it as you want. Oh my god. This is so frustrating. Let's move on. The punishment. So what actually happened? Were you banished? Were you banished from said location? Because if you were, that has a huge impact on what your character can do. And how people respond to them. Banishment is a pretty severe punishment. It's one of the worst punishments they gave out in medieval times, because without a pre-established system of friends and allies, like, what are you in this world? What are you now? You're nothing, that's what you are. People tend to underestimate how bad it was as a punishment to be banished from a location. And think about that. Repairability. So, can they make amends? Like, if he shows up with, like, the 100,000 gold he was sentenced of, are they going to let him back in? Are they okay with it now? Are they going to stop spreading rumors? Or is everyone still like, yeah, you still fucked up big time. Like, you still made a mess. You still blew up a science lab. You still blew up one of the most important experiments to ever be conducted in this world. And you should never be allowed to let it live down. That's important. Like, sometimes people will be like, listen, I know that you've technically made up for it, but I'm still not going to forgive you. Forgiving is an optional thing that people can decide to just not do. Consider this. Does your character think they can repair it? Maybe they think they can't, and it's, like, really easy to do, but they just are like, I can't do this. I can't ever do this. It is beyond my level of skill. It is beyond my level of caring about the circumstances to do this incredibly difficult thing to make up and to make amends. Let's move on a bit. Let's keep the pace going. Rumor factor. So, it doesn't matter what people think locally, because eventually your party is going to move out and about. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's just important that people locally know, but in some circumstances you might want some people abroad to also know about this. So what's the rumor factor? If it's like a nice spicy rumor, it'll spread pretty far. Like, merchants are going to be like, I heard this great story about, like, an idiot who blew up his apprentice with a fireball completely unintentionally. Like, that's going to go places. It's going to meet people. It's going to say hello, going places, meeting people. And it'll haunt you. Now you're haunted. Now every village you go into, people are instantly like, hey, it's that idiot who blew up the science lab. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. Important elements to consider. If it's low, your character might just be able to get away with it. Might just be able to just lie about, I'm not that person. Like, how do I match his description, huh? Have you ever met him? Have you listened to the rumors closely enough to identify them on sight? Okay, let's get to the last one. Apathy. So again, I mentioned, how much does your character actually care about this? Because eventually, there are two sides of the coin. 3 sides, actually. There's the public opinion, there is the afflicted opinion, and then there is the player's opinion. Like, if the player character doesn't care, good luck getting money out of them. Like, they'll probably resist having to pay up their dues. They'll be like, listen, I don't care. I don't care that you say that I'm responsible. I don't feel that I am. So, again, as I mentioned in a little footnote, it's entirely possible that people are like, they take pity on you because you took it personal. You broke an oath or a vow. Like, oh no, I broke my vow of poverty. And the church is like, listen, it's okay, cleric. Cleric, man, it's okay. You don't have to perfectly live up to that expectation at all times. And he's like, no, I broke it. I must leave. And everyone's like, oh man, do you hear about that poor guy? Like, the failure doesn't have to be something that negatively affects your reputation. It could be something positive. Like, people are like, man, this man cared so much that when he couldn't heal this woman, like, it was completely, like, out of his range. He could have done it, but the circumstances, oh, man. Like, don't you just feel bad for someone like that who gives up on their hopes and dreams because they couldn't live up to their own highest expectations? Bam. That just sets up a character, doesn't it? So why adventure? Why are these characters on the road? Well, as I mentioned, there's knowledge. A lot of... if you're a professor... At a proper university, you're expected to do research and analyze things. And the whole teaching thing is secondary to your job, by the way. A lot of people get that the wrong way around. No, your primary job is to do research. Your secondary job is to teach other little snots about things. Which is why they generally don't care that much. That, and you're expected to already be excited enough to do that shit yourself. Maybe, and this is a fun way to put it, maybe you're teaching abroad. I didn't put that in, but that's a good one. Like, what if your character just at every town says, listen, I'm gonna round everyone up, I'm gonna see who's interested in a little magic class, and I'm gonna teach them some bare basics. Like, maybe you're a recruiter. Maybe your whole job as a teacher is to go out there and find fresh blood. Like, it's entirely possible you're on such good terms that, like, listen, you're a recruiter, you go out there, you're gonna find some people, you're gonna teach them some things, and if they're interested enough, to get them to come to us and reinforce our numbers. Maybe the college is, like, running low and they need you to help out. The failure is easier to justify because you've probably been exiled or sent away or told to repair damages, and you're like, well, adventuring is a good way to pay off my money because I can't make cool shit. Bada bing, bada boom, your character instantly has this workable angle. And the master, well, as I mentioned, you can show your student what is real life like. What is it like to cast spells under duress? You can make a quest out of it where you have to take a character who's like several levels lower than yourself or like way weaker than you, and you have to bring him up to speed. And if you do that, you get like a big smack of money of like, hey, you brought him back alive. And if you don't, you have to pay X amount of gold before you get your next apprentice. And if you fail too many times, it's like you're become a failure because, hey, listen, look, there's that guy that got like several students killed. You see how good that is? Can you see yourself playing one of those characters? You already have that image in your head of a great and potent individual walking the landscape, trying to atone for themselves, or looking for knowledge. Every stone is upturned to find new knowledge. Or the master who has a little apprentice skipping around behind them, and they're like, ah! Or maybe they're just a teacher. Maybe they're just a teacher. Maybe they just go from place to place. They say hello, they go to the local bar, and they're like, hey, listen, if anyone has any kids, I teach reading classes. If they need a little extra school, I can help out. Like, maybe your local teacher isn't up to the snuff, and I can take care of that. Think about that. And maybe you'll find that it might not affect your character properly. Like, if you're a teacher like this, you're going to have vulnerabilities. You're probably going to have to put some points in places you don't want to put points, because you need to be able to teach properly. You need to be able to support the infrastructure of teaching. You need to be able to produce scrolls and wands and training equipment. You have to put money into it. It's not a great optimized build. You're not going to kill dragons in a single blow or convince the king you're the best person ever. But if you're a great teacher, the king is going to be like, man, you're a great teacher. You're training the new generation of guards just fine. Like, you've made my army stronger than anyone else. You can be a teacher for a military. You don't have to be for kids. Maybe you're a teacher for like a military regiment, and you've got this small group of special elites following you. Like, you're level 5, you're an elite amidst the guard, and everyone else gets taught by you. Like, you make the next line of elite guards, strengthening a kingdom. Every time you succeed, the kingdom becomes stronger and more influential as their military grows. Or maybe the Wizards Guild gains more potent artifacts as you gain new knowledge and information. And suddenly, your character doesn't just have a reason to care about what they're doing, but they're involved with it because there's so many tangible rewards that could flow right out of it. And that's... Ooh, my throat's starting to act up. And hey, So yeah, a teacher. More to it than you think. And might just be a nice thing to play.